Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Respecting the Beer. My name is Gary Arndt, and with me, as usual, is brewer extraordinaire Bobby Fleshman. And with us again is historian and beer aficionado Joel Hermansen. How are you doing?
I'm really good. I didn't get an extraordinaire, though.
No, you did not.
Okay. Noted.
This episode, we're going to do something a little different. We just want to focus on one product that you guys make. It's a beer called 547. It is a West Coast double IPA. And I'm going to leave it at that. And I want Bobby to explain where the origin of this beer came from. I don't think having a West Coast double IPA is in and of itself a big thing. I'm sure a lot of breweries have something similar to that. But what was the genesis of this particular beer?
I used to spend a lot of time in San Francisco when I was an astrophysicist. There were a lot of meetings out there. And I found my way to this bar called the Tornado, whose address was 547 Haight Street. And I was also home brewing, I think. This is something like 20 years ago. And I went in there and I naively asked for the best West Coast IPA. And if you've been there, you know the service is very unique to the Tornado. And they didn't even give me the time of day or have any dialogue exchanges, threw a beer across the bar at me. I drank it and I said, "What was that?" And it was a beer called Pliny the Elder by Russian River Brewing Company. And that was one of those moments that just changed my life. I'm like, this is not anything like anything I've ever had. And I went on to, brew that at home and investigate more who Russian River was. They weren't actually nationally known at this point, or they were barely. Yeah.
Explain what a West Coast IPA is.
Yeah, West Coast Americans tend to take it to 11, and this was taking it to 12 because this was an IPA that was well hopped, extremely late hopped. And what I mean by late hopped is put in the boil at the end or post fermentation or whatever. So you're keeping all the green, terpene, grassy, all those flavors in there. It was a style that was really came about when Vinny Trilorzo of Russian River opened the Blind Pig in San Diego. He started making these styles and it just changed the face of beer. It made America have its own style. And fast forward and he opens Russian River in Northern California. His number one client was a Tornado. So if ever he had one keg of something, they would get it. They had dibs on everything. And they never, ever run out of Pliny the Elder at the Tornado. That will never happen. It's their number one seller out there, and it's like $5 a pint. In San Francisco numbers, that's like $1. And yeah, I don't want to flood them. They're already busy enough, but make your way out there if you haven't been. So I got into home brewing. I was into it, but I was more into it for this reason and others. All these different experiences I had and digging into how to make hoppy beers led me to grow hops in my backyard. And we started making some fantastic, seasonal harvest ales. And I was taking the cues from what they were doing. And we were making sort of clones of this beer at some point. That recipe, he gives it out because he knows not everyone can make this beer, because just because there's a recipe, there's all the stuff in between the lines that he can't know to say. But he gave the recipe out, so we were brewing it. And man, was I getting a lot of recognition for someone else's beer. This was really good stuff. And my version was a little different, but it was just so good. And then I decided when we opened this, fast forward several years, Allison and I actually were in the Tornado. And I think maybe we were brainstorming the brewery even then. It was like 2010 or something. I looked over her shoulder and I saw the half door of the Tornado open. They always have the half door open because there's only one weather in San Francisco, so the door's always open. And it said 547. I took a picture of her, and that picture is on the wall downstairs. And I said, if we ever open a brewery, and I was leaning that way at that time anyway, if we open a brewery, we're going to make a double IPA and we're going to call it 547 for all the reasons. And so when it came time to open the brewery and I was developing recipes for it, I knew I couldn't just make Pliny the Elder. That was, this is an homage. This isn't a copy. So I sat down and I knew what was in it, but I try not to think about it. And I think this is how musicians may or may not approach a song. But I decided to be in that headspace, but not listen to it, to make that metaphor. And what came out was this beer. And I threw in a couple of hops that he didn't use, but most of the hops are the same ones, but they're put in different orders. And in a way, it's like being in the same key. And that's been a theme for a lot of beers I've been doing lately. but using the same notes, different ways. And this beer wasn't on brand, but it was on brand for me. So we built McFleshman's to be an English ale and a German lager brewery. But I am a West Coast beer fan, and I knew we were going to make a California Common, and I knew we were going to make, at that time I didn't know about a Brut, but we did make a Brut, and we did really well with that. And I knew we were going to make this double IPA, and eventually we would make pale ales and other lower strength IPAs. So we knew this was going to be a third leg of our chair. We would have three legs to hold up the brand of McFleshman's. It would be West Coast styles, and then those other European styles. We kind of we put it out there as our number, maybe the seventh or eighth beer we released when we first opened. And it got a warm reception, but I think they were a little confused by it because they were coming for hand pumps. They were coming for German lagers, and then the crowd was Wisconsin, right? They're not California. And a beer that big in hops 10 years ago, and at the time we opened, that was 7 years ago, they still weren't ready for it, I don't think. And it's been kind of a slow build. And I think now it's about time I give the mic over because we had to get an ambassador in here.
All right. So
yeah.
So that's how the beer came about.
Yeah.
How did you discover it? And what's your background with respect? Because you are, how shall I say, a West Coast IPA aficionado.
I am. Yeah, that's my favorite style of beer.
And when did you first? So did you have Piney the Elder before a 547, or which came first?
So my origin story with the it's, and if we're going to be correct too, the beer industry refers to it as Pliny the Elder. It's actually Pliny.
Yeah, exactly. We know we're saying it wrong, but that's how the
right.
beer
That's being done on purpose. But I was out in San Francisco in 2015. I was taking a class at Stanford that summer, and I spent, when I was out there, three different days. I was at Russian River for significant amounts of the day, and I like you, it was just like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
This is unlike anything that I've ever had, and at that point we had IPAs in the Midwest that had some acclaim behind them. Bell's Two Hearted Ale was around at that point, but this was something totally different. While in San Francisco in 2015, as the resident deadhead here as well, I was in front of Jerry Garcia's old house on Haight and Ashbury, which is just a very short walk from Toronado. And we went to Toronado. I was there at Toronado for a couple of days as well. And it's the most diverse, incredible place. Again, not to flood them with business, but if you get a chance, head over there. And I had it there again. There was no disruption in the quality.
Perfect glassware, perfect beer.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I had a long experience with that before I got here. I first had 547. I think it was just pre-COVID in 2019. And I had that kind of that same epiphany moment where it's like, wow, what I'm drinking right now is extraordinary. And you mentioned that it's an homage, but it's very, very different actually.
It is. We've done the blind tastings now, and it's not even close to blind. I mean, it's not even close. They're very different. Yeah.
Explain. I was actually going to ask you about this. You've done blind tastings between 547 and Piney the Elder.
Yeah.
Well, how did this come about, and what were the results?
That was my fault or idea. I had managed to get a bottle of Elder, and we decided, well, we're gonna put it up against 547. We had done it once before with another bottle that I had secured, but the second time we did it, I think we were a little bit more scientific with it, because we wanted to make sure that the Pliny the Elder that we had was bottled at a point that was similar to the 547.
Yeah.
So we didn't just pull from the tap line.
Yeah.
That was going to be my question. It
Yeah.
would be kind of
Yeah.
unfair if you had a
Yeah.
fresh beer versus
Yep.
an old.
Correct. We tried to take those variables into account, and we got some of our hop heads from the brewery. We had reached out and said, hey, we're planning to do this, and we did a blind tasting, literally blindfolded people with the old COVID masks.
Yeah.
We had those, and I mean, yeah, the results were very, very clear. The 547. And if you've ever come into the brewery, I have a tendency to talk it up quite a bit, because I just think it's exceptional. And I think the test data that we had that day kind of supported that.
The best data is it sells top in our volume and in our revenue in the tap room. And this is not a cheap beer to make or to buy. And that says a lot. People are voting with their dollar. It can't always be Joel behind the bar.
Well, so let's talk about that. So you're a fan of the beer.
I am.
You also work here
I do.
selling beer. And you've developed over time, how should I put it?
A cult.
You're a big promoter of the 547. So much so that when people come in, you will almost always recommend it. Whether or not
I always say don't pause because you'll end up with a 547 in front of Joel.
But this has kind of evolved into a thing, which is why we're kind of doing an episode just on this beer. The story behind it's interesting, but it's also kind of how this sort of local inside the building cult or mythology developed around it. And explain that, because I think a lot of that has to do with you.
Thank you. Well, number one, I'm a local guy. I mean, I'm from Appleton, and I know a huge number of people in town. So when people come in, I usually have a level of comfort with who's ever here, and I can, and I'm going to say this, I can be myself and just, put my opinions out there and say that, hey, if you're here, you're probably interested in what I think is the best beer in the state. So I usually, lead with, if they indicate that they don't like double IPAs, then I usually lead with it again, which sometimes, works. I've had people, and you've been here with me when this has happened, where there's, someone that says, well, I don't like IPAs. And then you give them a sample, and it's almost like that movie Ratatouille where the rat, eats the cheese and like all the lights go off, for people. And, they're like, oh my gosh, I have to have one of these. And I'm like, yeah, you like double IPAs now.
It's amazing the spectrum of people that drink it. There's not a type for this beer, which is kind of surprising. Age or gender or anything. There's no way to know who's going to be a drinker of.
Right. And I have a pretty big personality. So when people come in, I try to incorporate that into their experience. Because when you come in here, it should be an experience. And if you've not, been here, we're up in the Prohibition Room right now, which is just a stunning room. The entire McFleshman's brewery visit should be an experience. And I mean, the way that the building is structured, the way that the beer garden is structured, it's an experience. And I think 547 is a part of that. Are you going to talk about the bell, or can I?
First of all,
Well,
I was going to ask,
that's
what's the
where
best soundtrack? What's the best soundtrack?
Oh, 100, yeah, 100%. Yeah,
with 547.
we actually on my we have a San Francisco playlist that we like to tap into, and we played this during 547 Day last year, and I sprinkle it in periodically.
Which you're in charge of the playlist this year if you want to do it again.
Yes, it'll be done.
Okay, so let's.
We got two subjects now.
Yeah. So 547 Day. What is 547 Day, and how did that come about?
So the math behind it, I'm going to attribute to the math guy, but
It landed on a good date.
Right, it did. I'm always of the opinion that we need to have, we have Stout Week, we have Oktoberfest, which
Lagerfest.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we have all of these, fests and celebratory days that highlight a beer, but we needed a 547 Day. So you chose a unique day.
It works out to be May 47th, June 16th, if May had that many days. And people, they think it's a typo and they scratch their head. They get it. They like it. It landed on a Saturday last year. It was the first year to do it. And this year it's not going to, so we'll move it around a little bit. It's going to actually be June 21st this year, but we'll still call it 547 Day. It also is the same weekend that we have our anniversary. So we'll always book in those together. It'll always be 547 on Friday, and then it'll be about our birthday the next day. But yeah, it was a success. We thought, is this going to be a big deal on a Friday? And it was an enormous day on a Friday. I think people all called it in. It was great.
We did tie-dyed shirts.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we had the themed music and,
Yeah.
you know, obviously when
we're getting a band this year, it's
Yep.
going to be a whole thing. Yeah.
when you look at the label of the beer, because you had mentioned that earlier, the label of the beer really kind of harkens to that Haight-Ashbury experience of the late 60s, which is kind of a unique snapshot in history. And that beer kind of, when I drink that beer and I'm listening, and I very seldom will drink a 547 when I'm not either listening to the Grateful Dead or the Jerry Garcia band. It's just kind of adds to that whole Ratatouille, lights, colors, holy cow, kind of a moment that people have with it.
We have other ambassadors. Joel's created other ambassadors now for our brewery and that beer. Denny Wantke of Black Gold.
Yep.
He owns a company called Black Gold that moves. They're an environmental company. They're working with food industry and stuff. But his company name, I think, is the name of Central Waters. One of their big releases, Black Gold. Long story short, he goes around the state saying now that 547 is an important product, and he's driving all the time to get here. He might show up today.
Yeah, hopefully he does. Yeah, we have a lot of people who are putting that out there and celebrating it, elevating it. I don't think a week goes by where I don't see somebody at the grocery store or at the Y, and they'll say, "Hey, 547 guy," and yeah, so I guess now I'm 547 guy.
Suppose there are worse things to be known.
I've been called a lot worse than 547 guy.
So a couple months ago, however, you came up with another idea for what to do when someone orders the 547. Explain how that came about.
Might be a year now. We've been doing.
Yeah,
that.
I think
it a year?
Yeah,
it's been a long time.
It's been up there for quite a while.
I think it was up before 547 Day, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Last year.
yeah, because the logo on the shirt.
It'll ring your bell.
It'll ring your bell.
So it's
yeah.
over a year now, I think.
Yep. We needed a bell. And when I broached the subject, the answer was pretty simple. I said, we need a bell because we need a spectacle that comes along with it.
Pavlov's dog.
Right. And it actually does. Yeah. It acts almost like operant conditioning because somebody will be in the bar. This happens every time I work here. I will pour someone a 547. I will give our bell an enthusiastic ring, and invariably somebody within the next 30 to 90 seconds will wander up and say, what was the story? Why did that bell ring? And I said, well, that's our 547 bell. And they said, why do you have a 547 bell? And I said, why not? It's just an opportunity to have a spectacle.
And then the people that do know, it elicits a clapping and cheering.
Yes.
And then someone that wasn't thinking about another beer might now be, or whatever, the 547. Yeah.
Yep. And, you can hear it resonate all throughout the brewery. You can hear it up in the Prohibition room. You can hear it outside.
It would be perfect if someone ordered one right now.
It would.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really
the timing.
Would. So it's, I guess in a way, I know that the last episode you guys were talking about marketing. In a sense, it's a marketing activity that's kind of unintentional. I wanted to do it because it's fun and I enjoy a spectacle. And we've had, people that were so, impressed and they're like, would I be able to ring the bell? And I'm like, absolutely.
It's
come
like
on
spinning
back.
the wheel on Price is Right.
So we've had countless people that, came back, rang the bell. They took a picture, of them. But
are you kidding?
There it is. There it is.
Well, the reason why we're doing a full episode on this is because a lot of this happened organically. Like this wasn't a business plan where it's like, okay, we're going to brew this beer and we're going to do all these things. It was just, you had an ambassador and Joel and these things kind of happened and it ended up becoming, your best-selling beer. as a result.
In a lot of ways, yeah, I tried to not put focus on it so I could put it on the other ones that were in wholesale and may have a wider footprint. So yeah, you're right. It's organic.
It actually resulted in a new job title for me as well.
Which is?
Yeah, I'm the 547 demand coordinator.
Keeps us running our asses off in the back.
He's the
We brewed
supply
yesterday.
coordinator.
We brewed it again yesterday. We brewed it like 2 weeks before that. So we're chasing our tail back there as the quote supply coordinator.
And you've seen this in distribution too.
Yeah, we're seeing that, and we had to increase prices a little bit and concerned that the sales would drop, and they went up. So we're going to roll with it. We're going to see where this goes.
This is something you can't do for every beer. You can only do this, I think, for a set number of things, and probably a very small number, maybe one.
As in a day for the beer?
No, I mean, like, not in a day for the beer. You could do more of those, but like for having a bell. Like, I think
Right.
you guys try to
Well,
do a different bell, and that just
we joke about it a little bit. Yeah, you're right.
that you can. So here's my question. Let's say some point in the future, several years from now, you open up another public house. Would that public house have a 547 bell?
I think so. Yeah.
Is this something that is a McFleshman's thing now, or is it just something that would be in this facility?
I think it's a 547 thing. I think in some ways it's separate from McFleshman's. It's a parallel brand in some ways. In fact, we've been making beers under its label for a while. We have a red IPA, which has a whole story we can talk about another day, but we call it Stepchild. It's a sister of 547. It's the same likeness on the label. And then we have a new one we just made for people that want to drive home after 3. And it's Tornado, actually. So in reference to the bar again.
Which is fabulous.
It's a true West Coast. So where this one's a double, this is a true West Coast. It's a little drier, a little crisp, but it smells. Anyway, it's fantastic. I'm about to have one in a minute, I think. But that's going to have a label. So it's going to look like that it's inspired by 547. We're having a whole line of these beers come out.
And I think that was a good idea because every time I come in here, Joel tries to, he's a pusher. He tries to get me to order a 547 every single time.
Right.
And it's not that I don't like 547.
Yeah.
But it's a really high alcohol content.
Yeah.
And, I can maybe have one of those.
Yeah.
2, forget it.
Yeah.
Especially if I have to go home and do work or something.
Yeah.
So having an alternative like that, I thought was great.
Yep.
Is it possible? And if possible, would you consider a non-alcoholic version of it?
100%. The non-alcoholic game is heating up, and we've been working on it for probably 4 or 5 years behind the scenes. I think we're doing a good job with developing our own IP, our own NAs. But the answer is yes. And we got some names in mind.
Negative
for that
547.
Oh, there you go. There you go. But yeah, we got ideas for a family pack, an IPA pack. It's going to involve Stepchild, and we have other names that will riff on that. So yes, NA IPA that's inspired by West Coast style would be a logical progression.
Can I go to naming for a second?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you talked about this earlier, but the amount of thought and creative energy that goes into the naming of beers.
Good point.
Here in particular, and I've never worked in the beer industry other than here, but it's astonishing.
Yeah.
You and I probably exchanged 300 different names.
I know.
For the new Tornado.
Yeah.
And we had some fabulous conversations. Gary, you were a part of those. Having a couple of the conversations about what a good name for the beer would be. It's
and we
both
do that
fun and creative.
Exhausting.
Yeah, it is.
It's stressful because now that's the name. I mean, we have changed names before, but this one I had a lot of pressure. I don't mean to talk about another beer, but Tornado is a sibling, a kid sister of another name of 547. And we knew we had to nail it because we've been asked to make this beer for years. People have been asking for 6% West Coast for years. I'm like, this one's got to land. And we got to have the name. We got to go out the gate with this one. And we're working on the label now too. So yeah, that's a good side note. We didn't talk about that in the last episode, but it's part of the marketing and branding. Naming is exhausting and it takes a lot of effort. If I pull my phone out and show you where I keep all my ideas for names, is it will floor you. There might be
What I like, and a lot of
3,000-4,000
people
names
don't even know it when they come in here, but there's a story
behind every beer.
behind every name.
Yeah.
Like I had no idea because I didn't live in this community for like 30 years.
Yeah.
The name of Pirates Cove,
Right, which is our
came
other
from-
flagship. Yeah.
you know, a bar that was where your beer garden
Yep.
is now that burned down.
Oh yeah, and everyone that lives here did at that time absolutely knows that name, and that was chosen for that reason.
Well, that's one of the things that makes this place very special. Everything is intentional.
Mhm.
The naming, the branding, the artistic license that goes into the labeling, the craftsmanship that goes into the the brewing of the beer. You are never satisfied with
Never.
anything,
Never.
and you're always pushing all of those elements, which is
And
one of the reasons why you're as great as you are.
let's give Alex Schultz some credit for the labels. He does all of that. So he's not the artist, but he's the guy that brings the artist to the table. He makes it match. He works with an artist that matches where we want to go with the look and feel of a label. And then he does all the layout stuff, and that is non-trivial. That's an art in all of it, in and of itself. He's also a perfectionist. He's got that artist brain, and he does so much for us on that side of the equation for sure. I get people telling me, bring me some more posters at these bars that I deliver beer to, because people keep stealing your posters. Like, that is such a compliment. That tells you how awesome the graphics are, that people want them.
Would you feel the same way about people stealing your beer?
Oh, I mean, if they're just buying it you mean from me or from them? Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
No, a lot of your the posters I've seen, and they're not actually everywhere here. They're kind of just in your bathrooms.
They're not anywhere. Yeah, except I get maybe a couple in there.
They're kind of snarky.
We probably should do a little more with getting them on the wall. Yeah.
All right. Any last words on 547? We've devoted an entire episode to just one beer.
Well, I'm glad we did. This was a great conversation. And for those of you that are listening, come on in on a Wednesday night. Wednesday night is kind of the unofficial 547 night.
And
we have a wonderful time in here.
And when
on
I sell beer out in the wild, I'm delivering beer all over the place. I will tell people, come on the weekend. Of course, that's going to be fun, or Mile of Music. But if you really want to experience this tap room, come on a Wednesday night. It absolutely will make the best impression.
All right. Well, that wraps up another episode of Respecting the Beer. Thank you for listening, and make sure to subscribe to the show and check out our Facebook group, Patreon page to receive updates about future episodes.